Although September 9th was only meant to be another court day, Meghan Markle's reputation as a strong lady had suffered greatly by the time the gavel was dismissed. Her whole legal plan was publicly dismantled during the appeals court hearing, which was intended to be a brief procedural step. It was live, raw, and uncontrollable. Chief Judge William Pryor opened with a statement that cut like a sword across the courtroom. Your points of contention are irrelevant. It was more than just a criticism, delivered with the cool authority of someone who has seen through every tactic in the book. It was a direct jab at Meghan's legal team. The room's temperature changed at that same instant. Meghan wasn't there at all. However, her lawyer's confidence was shattered by the severity of that sentencing, as evidenced by their apparently pale expressions, as Meghan's team struggled to explain why they had omitted fundamental legal procedures. The judge's attitude changed from one of analysis to one of near disbelief. According to people close to the court, the courtroom fell hushed as they eventually acknowledged their lapse. The kind of silence that occurs when everyone recognizes they're witnessing something go terribly wrong, rather than the customary silence of etiquette. The man takes advantage of every mistake. The lawyer for Samantha Markle, Peter Tick, the seasoned litigator, had entered the courtroom with a plan and carried it out with the dexterity of a surgeon. Tickton went right to the point, rather than saturating the court with minutiae. He had a straightforward plan. Point out the flaw and the contradictions, then let Meghan's squad fall apart naturally. And that's precisely what took place. Tickton used the witty, almost derisive phrase, smorgasbord of arguments to describe Meghan's defense. And it stuck with everyone in the room. He wasn't merely criticizing their reasoning. He was criticizing their whole strategy. If they had a compelling argument, why were they hurling everything at the wall? Why couldn't they simply address Samantha's assertions head-on? That was a devastating implication. The truth frightened them. That term quickly gained popularity in both royal gossip forums and legal circles. It presented Meghan's group as chaotic and in need. Even worse, it gave rise to a fresh public narrative. Meghan Markle faced more than just her sister's challenges. In court, she was being outclassed. However, Tickton's argument wasn't the most harmful aspect. It was the reaction of Meghan's legal team. Rather than returning with clarification, they acknowledged that their request to dismiss had omitted important information. It's more than just a horrible court day. It's a meltdown. And it originated from attorneys Meghan had paid, trusted, and regarded as the best in the industry. According to insiders, Meghan was shocked when the news reached Monaco. She couldn't ignore this headline or change it in a podcast. Legal credibility was lost in this case. Furthermore, the timing couldn't have been more dire. She devoted years to re-establishing her reputation as a powerful, well-groomed woman of substance. She was now the public face of a judicial catastrophe. Damage control shifted into high gear behind the scenes. Crisis managers, public relations advisors, and even brand consultants. Everyone scrambled to keep the repercussions under control. However, the truth was already known. Previously seen as legally untouchable, Meghan Markle was recently humbled in front of a federal court, and the repercussions were only getting started. Tickton wasn't merely triumphing in a court case. He was changing the story. In front of the public, the very image Meghan had spent years building was suddenly being dismantled piece by piece. He was prepared for a legal struggle when he entered into the courtroom. However, he gave a masterful demonstration of optics. Every blunder made by Meghan's team became part of his show as he turned the courtroom into his stage. Tickton's confidence, according to observers, wasn't conceited. It was accurate. He had examined every move, analyzed every declaration, and foreseen every tactic Meghan's attorneys may employ. He didn't even flinch as they stumbled and attempted to turn around. As if he had anticipated it all along, he calmly pointed out their inconsistencies and continued. The man arrived ready for a game of chess. When Meghan's team arrived, they assumed it was checkers. The fact that Tickton didn't use shock tactics just made it worse for Meghan's group. He didn't yell, act out, or even speak louder. He let the facts do the talking. Furthermore, the facts were harsh. The most severe strike wasn't even permitted by law. It was sentimental. Court documents showed something quite troubling. Meghan's public remarks were said to have resulted in Samantha Markle receiving real death threats. These hateful tweets weren't coming from anonymous trolls. These threats were sufficiently explicit and detailed to necessitate the assistance of law enforcement. Samantha's team claims that the period coincided exactly with Meghan's most well-known media appearances, including the Netflix series and the Oprah interview. This is the crux of Samantha's case. These remarks, spoken in public, weren't only anecdotes. They were assaults. Her identity was destroyed. They portrayed her as a stranger, an opportunist, and a liar. Furthermore, Meghan's statement that she was raised as an only child did more than merely offend people. It reportedly caused Samantha's life to be rocked by threats since it touched a deep nerve. Abruptly, the legal reasoning changed. This was no longer about defamation. It dealt with consequences in the actual world. Samantha was expressing more than just emotional pain. She was citing police reports that linked patterns of internet harassment to a decline in mental health and safety. And everything altered as a result. It brought attention to Meghan's media strategy. Not just what she said, but also how she expressed it and how widely it was received. claimed that opinions are not the only things expressed by people utilizing Meghan's platform. Influence, that is, influence that has the power to inspire others. It has the power to provoke. And he asserted that there were repercussions in this instance. Following the case, legal experts began to whisper. This was not a silent matter. Even though they already had poor eyesight, they gained weight. Meghan's crew wasn't ready for the emotional gravitas that now accompanied them. The defense attempted to claim that Meghan's remarks qualified as free speech, since they were opinions. But when someone's bodily safety is jeopardized, the viewpoint defense becomes ambiguous. All of a sudden, the question is not only what she intended to say, but also what her words actually accomplished. This is where the irony lies. Meghan's team might have miscalculated the lawsuit's seriousness in their attempt to minimize it. They handled it as though it were simply another annoyance. However, Samantha and her crew battled as though it were a war. Insiders claim that because more potential claimants are now watching, Meghan's legal team is now rushing not only to win the lawsuit but also to stop more harm. It conveys a message if Meghan loses this, even in a symbolic sense. You can challenge her, you can beat her, and that's a strong statement in the court of public opinion. In Meghan Markle's world, the written opinion from the appellate court is currently the most anticipated court document. One question reverberates both inside Meghan's Montecito house and behind palace gates in Hollywood boardrooms. How awful will it be? A PR gut hit was already given by the oral arguments. However, the written ruling will decide whether or not that blow becomes a healable legal wound. Although the severe tone of the bench is not frequently reflected in judicial decisions, sources claim that Chief Judge Pryor's biting remarks were so blunt that it may not even be feasible to soften them for the record. It will be ingrained in legal history if terms like besides the point or highlighting their procedural blunders appear in the final ruling. Additionally, once written, it cannot be changed. There will be a blueprint and a publicly available document to support any future legal action taken against Meghan. The legal team for Samantha is already getting ready for that next stage. They don't want to win this appeal by a landslide. They have the long term in mind. They have been successful in revealing vulnerability, even if the dismissal is upheld. That's strategic gold, too. Future plaintiffs now have a precedent, a clear example of how to put Meghan's defenses to the test, regardless of whether they are resentful business partners, former employees, or other family members. The atmosphere at Montecito is characterized as chaotic. Meghan's inner circle has entered a state of complete containment. Experts in crisis public relations have been removed from other tasks. There are lighted phone lines. Contracts are undergoing a review. Finding perspectives that divert or change the public's attention is even being demanded of brand managers and podcast producers. However, the reality is that it isn't functioning. This goes beyond another tabloid smear. The state of the courtroom is a federally documented shambles. In particular, brand strategists are worried. Elegance, intelligence, and control have been the cornerstones of Meghan's post-royal persona. However, that image crumbles when your legal team acknowledges making amateurish errors in court. It becomes impossible to overlook the discrepancy between perception and reality. Even worse, it begins to influence transactions. Entertainment Insider's claims that a number of possible partners have started to quietly distance themselves. According to one CEO, Meghan's brand is now associated with legal uncertainty. Publishers and studios are concerned about more than just public opinion. They fear getting dragged into upcoming court cases, subpoenas, or public disputes. Legal responsibility clauses are being abruptly added to contracts by businesses that have been negotiating projects with her in order to protect themselves. Prince Harry is beginning to feel the effects as well. His brand is closely linked to Meghan's, and he is starting to feel the effects of the perceived legal chaos. According to people close to the marriage, tensions have been high behind closed doors. Harry had planned to reinvent himself as a global humanitarian and mental health advocate, but his name is now being dragged through TV shows and publications that are all about judicial guffs and have nothing to do with his causes. Senior royals are also observing from a distance with a mixture of satisfaction and worry. According to insiders, there is a sense of grim vindication within the royal gates. Despite their outward quiet, the couple who previously caused upheaval in the monarchy with their explosive interviews are now facing criticism from federal justices rather than tabloids, and that lands in a different way. The most remarkable thing is how fast the perception changed. With a devoted following and the protection of renowned attorneys, Meghan was once untouchable. She's vulnerable now, though. Everything was altered by a single court case, a strong opposition attorney, and a severe judge critique. Losing your control image is the only thing more detrimental than losing a court battle, and it is the true cost Meghan Markle is bearing, more so than any verdict.